When we're attached to a sale, we behave in ways that feel pushy, even though we're not consciously aware of it. That's because our intent affects what we say. The other negative of being attached to the outcome is that we have this debilitating feeling of rejection when we don't get what we want.
Josh Braun. Josh is the founder of Braun Training, a company that he uses to help businesses improve their sales process.
I think the more of your ideal prospects you have conversations with that last longer than 2 or 3 minutes, the more money you make as a salesperson. Knowing how to have conversations to get to more truth is, I think, a very important skill. Let go of assumptions and switch from convincing people to do what you want them to do to instead letting go that there's even a problem to solve and asking yourself as a mantra, is there a problem?
What is the best piece of coaching advice that you've ever received in your career?
2 words. Everything changes. So what that means is, and specifically in sales, is sometimes you're going to have an amazing quarter. You're going to get a new fancy job title. You're going to close the biggest sale of your life. And you're going to be on this like upward trajectory. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a bad quarter, couple bad quarters. You may even be on a performance improvement plan. You may even get let go. And so you're going to be kind of down here, and then you're going to get like a better job, and it's going to kind of repeat. So it's this thing in sales. And what I have learned in my 56 years on this planet is not just sales, but life. I mean, I'm putting in a sauna now in my house.
Nice.
And I thought it was a good decision. So I paid some money, and they built the sauna up, and I realized as they were building it up that I had given them wrong directions, and I had to have it moved and turned a different way. And so there was an unexpected financial ramification of that. So it changed. Great, got a sauna. Oh my gosh, put it in the wrong place. So if you realize that, like the weather, life and sales goes like this, it sort of takes the edge off because you expect it.
You're wearing for anyone listening, your hat says Detach on it, and that seems fairly apt given what you've just said. Is that something to do with it as well? The idea of detaching?
Yeah, it's somewhat related, a little different. So many years ago, I interviewed for a job. I was a school teacher, and I interviewed for a district technology coordinator. This is going back, 15 or 20 years. So I was an early tech adopter, like one of the few in the whole county. And so I prepared for this interview. It was the first position being created, and I knocked that interview out of the park. I mean, I had samples. It was as if I had the job ready. Could not have done anything better. But I had my sights on that job. Like I was going to get that job. I was attached to it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get the job. And I was in a tailspin for many, many months, probably about 4 or 5 months, because that's what happens when you tie your self-worth to an outcome that you don't fully have control over. So sales works the same way. You can do everything right, but ultimately you don't decide when or if people buy. So this does not mean you're complacent. This does not mean you sit on a couch eating bonbons. This means that you do the best that you can, and then you yield to what happens. And there is a power and a confidence in that makes the selling profession and your life just a little bit more free and calm.
You've talked a lot about this idea of detachment, but especially from the outcome when you are having those sales conversations and things. How easy is it for reps, and what is the kind of advice that you give out to these people when they are looking to kind of change the way they look at the calls that they're having, whether it's their confidence in it or just trying not to look at that destination? Is that a conversation you find yourself having over and over again with reps?
So if you wanted to get better at sports, do you play any sports, Sandy? Are you an athlete at all?
I surf a lot. I did a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Stuff like that.
How did you get good at jiu-jitsu?
A lot of time.
Doing what?
Like getting beaten up and being on the mats, just time doing it over and over and over again, I guess. Learning the moves. Same with surfing, just riding a wave over and over and over again.
So you mean you didn't read a LinkedIn post about jiu-jitsu and you weren't better at jiu-jitsu?
No, I did not.
So it's the same thing with this, right? So when we're attached to the outcome in sales, there's 2 sort of things that happen. One is that the prospects can smell our commission breath. Because when we're attached to a sale, we behave in ways that feel pushy, even though we're not consciously aware of it. That's because our intent affects what we say. The other negative of being attached to the outcome is that we have this debilitating feeling of rejection when we don't get what we want. And we're so attached to it, right? So in order to work the detached muscle, like getting good at jujitsu, you can't read about it. You can't listen to a podcast about it. You have to work the muscle. So what's the muscle to work? It is a very, in my perspective, valuable muscle to work that very few people work. And that is being aware of your thoughts. So most people have a thought and they respond. If you've ever gotten into a debate with someone about anything, they have a thought and they talk. That's 99% of the world is on autopilot. Have a thought, say something. Same thing in sales. When a prospect is talking, if you're not aware of your thoughts, you're thinking about what you want to say next. So in order to become aware of your thoughts, you have to meditate 5 to 10 minutes a day. And what meditation does, and by the way, meditation does not mean clearing your thoughts. There's no such thing as clearing your thoughts. Thoughts are coming in and they're random all the time. What meditation does, the work is, when you notice your thought, you just notice it and you come back to a breath. And every time you notice you're lost in thought and you come back to your breath, meaning you're aware of your thought, that's a rep. So that's like a jujitsu move. And after doing a lot of those reps, what happens is a prospect's talking, you have the thought about what you want to say. And in that moment, because you're aware of your thought, you decide you don't want to say that. And instead, you want to be curious and you want to listen. So in order to detach, not only in sales, but also if you don't want to get angry at people because they're not going when they get to a red light or they're flipping you off, and you want to have that muscle of pausing and reflecting and deciding, maybe I don't want to do anything. Then you meditate for 5 to 7 minutes a day. And it's a practice. You're not done with jujitsu because you achieved a certain level of success. It's an ongoing practice. So mindfulness, or being aware of how your mind works, is an ongoing practice. Meditation's great for it. Yoga's great for it. Things like that. Psychedelics is also a nice complement to that as well, to get an understanding of your ego and awareness state. So all these things help to become aware that you're not your mind's thoughts.
This could be seen as quite sort of antithetical to your stereotypical view of what a kind of salesperson looks like. I guess like the connotations of Wolf of Wall Street and all this stuff. And I know that's a very, very big generalization on my part, but how quickly did you come to these realizations and find these practices within your own career? And then is this something specific that you talk to other sales organizations about?
Yeah. So first off, I want to be very clear that everybody, Jordan Belfort, me, Andy, all these sales people talking about sales advice, everybody, including myself, is sharing perspectives, not facts. So most sales advice is not objectively true. So I have a perspective on sales. So does Jordan. So does Andy. So does everybody else that's sharing things on the internet. So your job as a salesperson is to see which of these philosophies fits well with your soul or your philosophy, and to decide if that's the one you want to explore. But I don't want to come across as they're right and I'm wrong.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some people that have a lot of success using those approaches, and that's cool. And then there's also people that feel like this is a better approach for them mentally and ethically. Then you gravitate toward that way of being. So if you want to work on the detached way of being, one of the ways to do that from a practical perspective is to let go of assumptions and to switch from convincing people to do what you want them to do to instead letting go that there's even a problem to solve and asking yourself as a mantra, is there a problem? So I'll give you a couple of examples of that just so you can make this very practical of this. Is there a problem? Many moons ago, I walked into the mall with my wife. She was returning something. I did not need anything. To kill some time, I walked into a Fit to Run store. If the sales associate started convincing me on these new shoes she got in, I would have said, I'm good. If she said, what brings you in today? I would have said, I'm good. If she said, we got this sale on these new Brooks sneakers, I would have said, I'm good. But she had a detached mindset. So instead, she looked down at my sneakers. She made an observation. She goes, oh, are you a runner? I go, yeah. She goes, training for any races? That's 2 questions. And I said, well, actually, I'm training for my first half marathon. And then she said something brilliant. She said, oh, you've probably had a running gait test. And I said, what's that? And I share this in my workshops. There's a video. I'm running on a treadmill in the store doing a running gait test, which I'd never heard of before. She freezes the frame and she zooms into my ankles and they're pronating. And she goes, notice anything about your ankles? I go, yeah, they're pronating. So what? She goes, well, the problem is if you run in sneakers that are not made for pronated feet, specifically when you run more than 6 or 7 miles, you increase the chances of getting injury like runner's knee and plantar fasciitis. If you'd like, I could check your sneakers to see if they're made for pronated feet. And about 7 minutes later, I'm spending $180 fucking on new sneakers and insoles. Right. So this is the idea of, is there a problem? Now, if I said I'm not a runner and I just walk, I'm not a fit. So I got one of the best cold calls I ever got was from Kendra Warlaw. She worked at Sales Gravy. This was going back a couple years ago. She called me up. This is exactly, she has this mindset of detached. And she has this mindset when she cold calls of not, can I book a meeting? But is there a problem here? Is there a problem here? Is a mantra that switches you away from convincing to asking, because you can't discover if there's a problem if you're explaining. So Kendra calls, I pick up. I'm in the car with my wife, pick her up on the Bluetooth. Hello? Oh my God, Josh, I didn't expect you to pick up. I'm actually going through the drive-thru at Starbucks. Oh, what are you getting? Caramel macchiato. How can I help you, Kendra? Yeah, Josh, I know you sell courses on your site, like the Badass Guide and Poke the Bear course. When people try to pay, but their credit card fails, how are you recovering those payments today? Are you doing that yourself, using like a Dunning automation, or using like an external team? And I said, I don't think I have failed credit card payments. I'm using Stripe. And she said, sounds like you're logging into Stripe pretty frequently and checking your failed credit card payment report. And I said, I have no idea what that is. And she said, if you'd like, I'll send you instructions on how to check it. And if there are a lot of payments, perhaps we can chat further. And I said, sure. And a few minutes later, she sent me instructions. And it turns out I didn't have any failed credit card payments, or not that many. So it wasn't a fit. But if there was, I'm thinking of Kendra. So the shift here is away from explaining and convincing and to what I call poking the bear, or asking questions that illuminate a potential problem and then shutting the front door and seeing if that's a problem for the prospect. It may or may not be. So there are no objections to overcome here. The person either leans forward and shares and says, yeah, this is how I'm doing it, or I'm not running, or I'm not selling courses anymore. Or if you're selling grass-fed beef and they say I'm a vegan, that's not an objection. That's the truth. You go call people that are eating meat. Just like I have a vendor for that is not an objection. We call it objections, and therefore we react in a way of convincing, but it's information about how they're currently getting the job done, which is everybody running in sneakers today or doing the job somehow. So I call that out up front to see if there's a potential problem that we might be able to help them with. It's just a different whole mind shift. And what happens when you have this philosophy, not as a way to get a sale, but as a deeply rooted philosophy, is your energy sounds completely different on a cold call. Your shoulders are down and you lean back and you relax. And you know this in jiu-jitsu or in surfing. The more you tense up, the harder the sport is, whether it's surfing, jiu-jitsu, guitar, piano. So when you kind of lean back and you're sort of indifferent, you get into more of a flow state, and people pick up on that energy, and they're more likely to open up and want to have a conversation with you.
I guess that ties into the idea of, not thinking about this word persuasion and, trying to persuade people into something, and it's just flipping that on its head. And, I know that you talked about, objections are usually something to sort of overcome, and actually it's not that there's something to overcome. It's that if you word it the right way, you can just get rid of them entirely. Am I kind of on the right lines there?
Well, that depends. So the idea here with objections is very interesting with salespeople, because the word itself has weight. Whenever someone hears the word objection, they feel it's something that they have to overcome or handle. But I would postulate, specifically, I have a vendor for that, is not an objection, because no matter what you sell, like in the running example, people have sneakers. So if you're making a cold call and you don't want to hear that anymore, you could simply say something like this. Hey, Josh, my name is Ben Jones. We've never spoken before, but I follow you on LinkedIn and was hoping I could ask you a question. Do you have a couple minutes? Sure. How can I help you, Ben? So, Josh, I noticed that over the last 3 months, your posts have gotten 3,126 comments. How are you going about finding the people that commented that might be a fit for your workshop so you could reach out to them proactively? Are you like doing that manually? Do you have an automatic way to surface those to the top, or is that not something you're doing? It's impossible for someone to say, I have a vendor for that. Why? Because I'm calling out the vendors, the way they're getting the job done today. And so if I were to say, I don't do that, I don't want to do that, I got so much business coming inbound, and this person does that, that's not a fit. And that's a great outcome on a cold call if determined early, because now I don't have to send 15 cold emails to this person. Or they say, well, gee, I haven't thought of that. Like, I haven't even been looking at that. That's super interesting. Is that what you do? And now we've created an opening. So there's no objection here. Someone says, I'm not interested after that. Instead of trying to say, why aren't you interested? Or can I have 37 seconds? If you're detached, you just drop back and you pause for a couple seconds and you say, that's okay. I know you didn't ask me to call you. If I'm not asking too much before we hang up, is it that I called you at the worst time, or is this just not really relevant for you? And you just shut the front door. Can you send me some information? Oh, sure. What's your email address? It's blah, blah, blah. Hey, just so I don't do you a disservice by sending you irrelevant information, would it be okay if I ask you a couple questions first? See if that email would make sense? Sure. I can't talk right now. I'm in a meeting. Okay, I'll call you back. All right. So it's a very different mindset, because when you detached, you have an abundance mindset. Meaning, if someone says F you and hangs up the phone, traditional advice is to call them back and ask them a different question. My advice is to not call them anymore. And I'll just call someone else that doesn't say that, because that's a lot of people. So I have this abundance mindset. I don't need everybody to have a conversation with me. People being rude and angry, if you study detachment, which is very much has roots in Stoicism, is a world without rude and angry people is impossible. If you expect everyone to be nice and polite when you cold call, you are going to suffer and be disappointed. When I cold call, I expect 1 out of 15 people to be really angry and upset. And I just, I had, God, 8 years ago, I called into Geico, the chief technology officer. At the time, his name was Jess Reed. And I cold call him. He goes, is this a cold call? Like in an angry voice. And I dropped back and I said, it is. I bet as a CTO, you get a lot of these. And he just opened up. He goes, yeah, dude, I do. Like, what's up? Right? Versus, can I have 27 seconds to tell you why I called? That's a convincing, you can feel the pressure there. So what I did there is I just labeled his underlying emotion. It's like when you walk into a Hugo Boss store, a department store here in the States, salesperson typically always will say, hey, my name is Josh. How can I help you? And immediately you're in the zone of resistance, because you're going to say, I'm just looking, which is a lie. You didn't drive across town and go to the store just to look. It's a reaction to sales pressure. But what if instead the department store person at Hugo Boss, instead of saying, can I help you? Or welcome in a voice, just looked at you and calmly said, this. Business trip? I would have said, well, actually, no, I'm going to a wedding. So I'm going to correct him. That's called elicitation. You're taking an educated guess about what the other person is thinking or feeling. And if you're right, they'll confirm. If not, they'll correct. Again, we're not filling people's heads with information. We're pulling it out.
It's crazy, because listening to this and all these examples. So for me, I'm not from a sales background, but I've been in this podcast thing for 6 years. And whilst it's not discovery calls and things like that, it's still conversations like this with someone I've never met, and, facilitating doing this thing that we all learn to do when we're kids, but learning how to do it in an effective way. And for me, maybe it almost sounds, everything you're saying sounds so obvious. Like, of course you do it this way. Why wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that's something that you've bumped into before. Like, of course you talk about it this way. Why isn't it so obvious to so many reps out there to kind of talk this way? Is it the kind of old school way of the sales industry, or is it they kind of coach something different? Because I know there's different methodologies and things. Why isn't everything you're saying so obvious to people when they're kind of even just first starting out in the industry?
Well, it depends on what you're exposed to. And again, there's not judgment here or right or wrong. These are, again, and you put it really well, these are different versions of the craft. So
Mm,
some people like jujitsu, some people like taekwondo, some people like what's the aikido. These are all different disciplines.
mm,
And so I don't know if obvious is the right word or not. Some people may know about it and choose that I would never do it that way. I need to like do it my way. So these are different perspectives.
sure.
I early on in my career studied Stoicism and Buddhism and got into meditation. And so I was exposed to some different things. I also was in therapy, and I was really interested in this technique the psychologist was using, which was called motivational interviewing. I was like, what is she doing that's getting me talking? And it was through trying to help me find my own motivation. So I kind of used some of these approaches early in my sales career because, like everyone, I was reading the traditional sales books, which are all based on persuasion and pushing. And I wasn't getting very far. And more importantly, it didn't feel good on my soul. Like I wouldn't want someone doing these things to me, like double tapping and saying weird like things to pressure. So I started just doing the opposite stuff, just based on what I was learning from my psychologist and Buddhism. And I said, what's the opposite of pitching and persuading? Well, it's listening and understanding and letting go of assumptions and detaching and seeing if there's a problem. And so it kind of changed. I wrote a mantra down on my wall many years ago. Is there a problem? Versus book a meeting. Right. And so the energy started to shift. And I noticed that people started opening up and having real conversations with me. And I think this might be one of the few objectively true things in sales. And you guys can gut check me out there in the audience if you have a different perspective. But I think the more of your ideal prospects you have conversations with that last longer than 2 or 3 minutes, the more money you make as a salesperson. The fewer, not emails that you send, not videos, but conversations you have with your ideal prospects, the more of those you have, the more money you make. So knowing how to have conversations to get to more truth is I think a very important skill. And again, lots of ways to do that. This was just a way that resonated with me.
But it's like I said at the beginning, it's such like an antithetical way to do it. And I've had so many of these conversations with people like yourself, and it's so awesome to get so many different takes on it. And it's nice that someone in your position is saying that there is no right or wrong perspective, because I think there's a general consensus on places like LinkedIn that there kind of is a right or wrong way. And usually it's because, and this is no shade to you at all, usually because someone's selling a course behind it, right?
So I'll even go a step further. So I don't even think it's LinkedIn. I think most conversations you have with people when they're sharing something, it's a perspective, not a fact. And I think most things that you hear are not objectively true. Certainly on LinkedIn, you hear a guy like me sharing something and you're like, oh, that's must be what you have to do. Like I just saw something this morning, a comment. Someone said, well, the sales bros said you can't use, I didn't even know who the sales bros were. I guess it's another influencer like me or whatever. They said you can't use a permission-based cold call opener. It's a no-no. As if that's, a sent from God above. So that's a perspective. I am sharing a perspective. Everybody on LinkedIn is sharing a perspective. Nobody knows anything definitively. We're all doing sharing based on our experiences. So the only reason I'm able to share what I am sharing is because of the experiences that I've had in Stoicism and Buddhism or whatever, or psychology or different psychedelic experiences that I've been on. Someone else has a different set of experiences and they're sharing what's worked for them. Is one better than the other? No, they're just that person's experiences based on their life. So that's how you have to look at all of this stuff, myself included, and say, oh yeah, that's Josh's take. That's Jordan's take. That's Andy's take. That's Beck's take. That's Jason's take. That's Justin Michael's take. And now, what's my take? Like, what do I want to do? And that's the nice thing about the profession, is that there is no right answer 99% of the time.
You mentioned briefly about kind of cold outreach and things like that. That's another really interesting part of this whole process that I'm really enjoying talking to people about. And you just kind of said there about, being actually having these kind of meaningful connections with people. And, it is important. And it's also something that I don't think happens as much anymore. I think the volume of connections that we have now is higher than it's ever been, but I'm not sure how meaningful they are. Like you said, if you can have these 2-3 minutes or longer conversations, that's way better than sending 1,500 emails and you have 3 or 4 that come back to you. What I guess what are some tips to try and have more of those meaningful engagements? Because and I know, like, we can get onto the AI stuff, but now that you do have, Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it is, automating your inbox and doing it all for you, it's easier than ever. Weirdly, I literally had this conversation with last week's episode with a guy called Jeff. And he was saying, back in the day, 6-8 years ago, it was all about personalization. And you'd be like, oh, like, hey, Josh, your hat says detach. Oh, you're into Stoicism too, right? I just read Ryan Holiday's new book. Like, I hope you've read it as well. Let me know your favorite part. And then using this
P.S. Do you want to
personalization.
buy? P.S. Do you want to buy my stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's this personalization thing. But now, because of AI, Jeff was kind of saying that's been flipped on its head, and everyone just sees right through it now. It's so transparent because it's it's so easy for AI to just latch onto your LinkedIn, find one thing, and just tie that bullshit onto an email to you. What are some ways that you can foster this kind of meaningful engagement with people so that you can end up having the conversations with them that you were speaking about earlier?
So let's give you a tangible example. We'll make it
Please.
super simple and tangible. So the first thing we have to have an idea of is who are the people that we want to have conversations with. And that's not everybody. There's always going to be a subset of all your customers that are your best customers. So let's imagine you work for a company that allows you to do the following. You go to a concert in Miami. The biggest problem is you got to get there super early to get a spot, or you got to pay $50 to park inside the garage. And when the concert's over, you got to leave before the finale. Otherwise, it's an hour and a half to get out of there. Right. So, or you can hire an Uber to take you there and drop you off and wait, or you can get a driver to wait. It's kind of expensive. Uber's a little unreliable. So what this company does, Spot Hero, is they allow you to book a spot in advance from your house. That's a block or two from the event for like on the cheap. That's away from all the traffic. So you can get there when you want to get there. It's already reserved for you. It's like at someone's house or at someone's business. And you can kind of slink in and slink out. So if I'm a salesperson selling that, the first thing I have to do is, who am I going to call? Well, I'm not going to call you, Sandy, because you're not going to see a concert next month. But I do have a list of people that are all going to see Krunbin in Miami in 3 weeks. And so I'm going to get a list of those people, right? A subset of people. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technology or a service called TitanX. And I'm going to find out of those people, which ones are most likely to pick up the phone when I call them. Because some of those people will never pick up the phone. And I certainly don't want to call them if I know they're never going to pick up the phone. I'll email those people. But I'm going to start with the people that are going to pick up the phone. So now I have all these people going to see a concert next week or next couple of weeks. And I have their phone numbers. And I know to a high likelihood that when I call them, they're going to pick up the phone. Very simple. So who's going to pick up? And more importantly, what's the potential problem? So in this case, the problem is they might be paying expensive parking, have to leave early, taking a driver, and they might not know about this thing called Spot Hero, what we just talked about. So now I'm going to call them up, and they're going to answer the phone. So now, because I'm detached and I don't have any assumptions about what's going on, I'm just going to use my poke the bear cold call framework. And they're going to pick up, and they're going to say, hello, and I'm going to say, Sandy, and they're going to say, yeah. And I'm going to say, hey, Sandy, my name is Josh Braun. I know you weren't expecting my call. We've never spoken before. I was hoping to speak with you briefly. Do you have a couple minutes? Sure, how can I help you? So, Sandy, I know you're going to see Krunbin a couple weeks in Miami. When you go down to Miami for concerts like that, do you typically drive yourself and park like at the structure, take an Uber, or do you hire like a driver? Oh, I just drive down there and park in the structure. How's that been going? Well, it's what it is. It's kind of crowded down there. Oh, you've probably heard of services that allow you to find a spot in advance? Well, what's that? Yeah, so at Spot Hero, instead of you having to go and wait or leave the concert early, we allow you to book a spot in advance so that you can go whenever you want. It's usually like 60% less than parking at the garage. If you'd like, I can send you some spots that are near the venue. right? That's it. And I'm going to have a conversation. Now, some people get F off. I don't take cold calls. Okay. I'll say bye. And then I'll just call the next person. Some people will open up and have a conversation with me. Some won't. And for the people that never pick up the phone, I will send an email. Josh, looks like you're going to Crunbin. And by the way, it's not personalized, it's personal, because I could send the same email to everyone going to see that concert. Hey, looks like you're going to see Crunbin on May 26th. Typically, that means circling the lots or paying for expensive parking in the structure and having to leave early before Laura Lee's final base run. People are using Spot Hero to book a spot in advance. Simply zap a QR code, costs usually between $8 and $10. Leave when you want, come when you want. If you'd like, I could send you some spots. Right? So same idea. And it's personal around a specific problem that I could send to everybody going to see Crunbin. So that's how I would do the cold call and the email. Again, personal, but not personalized, but specifically around a potential problem that someone might have getting the job done. And I have to have a hypothesis about that I'm going to test out when I call people and get back to my mantra. Is there a problem here? Because they may say, I'm not going to that concert anymore. Or I have a private driver, 24/7. Guy takes me out wherever I want to go. Not a fit. Or I use Uber. Oh, you probably looked into Spot Hero. What's that? Yeah, I looked into Spot Hero. And then I'm going to say this. Sounds like you couldn't find the spot when you used it last time. No, it wasn't that. It was X, Y, and Z. That's the elicitation that we talked about earlier. Notice what I'm doing? I'm not filling people's heads with information. I'm drawing it out. I'm waiting for them to say, what is Spot Hero? Well, with Spot Hero, you book a spot in advance for usually between $8 and $15. You can walk there, walk back to the car, so you don't have to pay expensive parking and you don't have to miss the finale. How does it work? If you'd like, I could show you, right? So these are ways of pulling information out of people around a specific problem. Hopefully that answers your question, Sandy.
No, it's an awesome answer. Do you think that's a step in the sales process that a lot of organizations don't spend enough time on? That idea of kind of finding that ICP, for lack of a better term, finding those right people. Because I know there's often departments that just do that and then they hand it over to the salespeople and things. Do you think sometimes that's there's a bit of connective tissue there that isn't quite doing what it should be doing?
So what I see is it's twofold. One, it's very easy to create lists of people. And so when I look at sales teams, what I usually see was lists of people with 50 different titles. That's a red flag because when you're making cold calls, they may care about different things. So the list becomes your message. You have to niche the list down. The next thing that I see is that a lot of sales organizations have not gone what I call through a jobs to be done exercise. You guys can Google this if you want to know more about jobs to be done. But when you're calling someone, you have to understand that they have a job they want to get done and that they're getting it done somehow. And you have to be able to visualize and see all the ways they're getting it done. And then you have to understand what is the potential no good, very bad thing that happens if they keep doing what they're doing. And you have to see that as an infomercial in your head. When I talk to reps about this, what they end up sounding like is, well, we streamline the parking process. I go, well, how are they parking today? Well, they're using an optimized no, specifically, I can't see that. You have to feel it in your gut. So when I work with sales organizations, we do a show and tell. We have a customer come in and they show the reps how they were driving to see concerts before, how they were using spreadsheets to calculate commissions, how they were doing it before, specifically, viscerally. And then they show what the after looks like, before and after, like an infomercial or like a home improvement project. Reps are usually getting the after, but the solution doesn't matter unless you understand the problem. So it's both of those things. It's rushing through the list creation process and not having a understanding at a deep, visceral level of the job to be done, how they're getting it done today, and the cost of inaction or the terrible, no good, very bad thing that happens when people do nothing. And then again, married with the Detach framework and this idea of using questions instead of statements to test a hypothesis.
I think it's something that you've said that no one else has ever said is this idea of drawing the information out of them rather than giving it to them. Previously, the conversations I've always had have been probably about the information being given. So for example, and I think that's also solid advice. Like you said, perspectives, nothing's right or wrong, but it's thinking about the nail in their foot and presenting the problem that they have and relating to that rather than just going, this is our product and this is the color of the website and look how lovely it is and let's do a demo. But it's really cool to hear from you that actually it's not just about that. It's about getting them to kind of give you the information for you, essentially.
Yeah, because it's kind of madness to think about it. If you pitch or explain first, that would be like someone saying to me, we've just opened up this amazing jujitsu studio in Boca Raton, specifically for people that are over the age of 50 years old. And the purpose of my call is to set outside some time to tell you about it and to schedule a visit. What's better for you, Wednesday or Thursday? And then me saying, I'm crippled. I don't do jujitsu.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of madness to do it that way. Right. So it's almost like we've got this great grass-fed beef. It is organic. It's shipped to your door. It's high quality. And the purpose of my call is to send you a sample. What's your address? That's explaining and pitching, right? And the prospect's going to say, I'm a vegan. Right? It just doesn't make any sense. I'll give you another example, discovery call. Prospect says, does your software record calls? And the rep gets excited, wants to go and explain. What an opportunity to explain. Not only does it record calls, it transcribes them and uploads them to the Salesforce opportunity record, like 99% accuracy. Let me show it to you. And the prospect says, that's too bad. Legal does not allow us to record calls. So, right, this is why explaining backfires. Without a problem, without context, the solution has no value. So we got to switch from explaining to asking. So when someone says, does your software record calls? You could say, well, it can. It sounds like you have a reason for asking. Well, we don't want to record calls. That's why our software allows you to disable call recording at the admin level so no one can record calls. Does your apartment complex have a pool? Oh my God, the greatest pool in Boca Raton. 50 feet, just installed a diving board, brand new resurfaced. When can you come see it, Thursday or Friday? Oh, that's too bad. I have a 2-year-old and I don't want them anywhere near a pool. Does your apartment complex have a pool? Sounds like a pool's very important to you. Well, it's not. I have a 2-year-old and don't want them anywhere near a pool. I have a 2-year-old also, which is why I choose to live here. The pool, when it's not in use, can only be entered with a fob. It's got a lifeguard on duty. And in addition to that, there's a cover over it at night. If you'd like, I can show it to you. Sure, I'd love to see it. Right? So this is why pitching and explaining and convincing before we have understood, my perspective anyway, backfires.
Would you say this is, because I know you offer, a lot of different, talks and courses and that kind of thing, but is this generally the kind of cornerstone of the advice that you find yourself giving to teams over and over again? And would you say in your broad experience that this is where sales teams tend to kind of break down in terms of execution?
I don't think anyone's breaking anything down. Everybody is doing the best that they can do with what they have. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, it's like when you go do jujitsu, it's not like you're breaking down, you're trying something.
Sure.
You're trying a certain technique and you're trying this thing. So everyone's trying to do what they can do based on the information that they have. So they try what they have and maybe they like where it's at. If not, they start to seek. And sometimes they'll stumble across my perspective and they're like, that's interesting. And some people will try it and be like, not for me. And other people will try it. If you go on my website, you could see, 10 or 12,000 people, their words, what it's done for them. But it is just them and not everyone. So that's the nice thing about the profession. You get to try some things and see what's working for you. But if you don't have a problem with how you're doing it, then I would not change. Like one of the first questions I ask people is when you're having conversations with you, how many out of 10 would last more than 2 or 3 minutes? And they go, oh, 80%. I go, oh my God, can you teach me? We want to bring you in last week I had a call from a company. This was great. Josh, a well-known company. We want you to come in and do a keynote for our top sellers. I go, they're your top sellers and you want to do a workshop on selling for your top sellers. I go, why wouldn't you just leave them alone? Why would you want have some? Well, they could always I go, they're good. They don't want someone coming in that doesn't know this industry, talking to them. They're your top sellers. There's no problem here. If you want a motivational speaker, that's fine. I don't do that. But I'm not going to go and teach them how to sell when they're your top people. I live this in my own prospecting too. I mean, last week I had another Fortune 500 company. The business people wanted to bring me in, and I said, look, before you we get too wound up here and walk down the aisle. This is exactly what I said. There's 3 reasons why I might not be a fit that you may have to ask, typically procurement, but it may be different in your organization. One is I get paid before the workshop. So I don't get paid 30 days or 60 days or 90 days after. Some companies don't work that way. Mm. 2, I do not sign service agreements or NDAs, nor do I require any confidential information. And 3, I like to speak to 2 or 3 people before the workshop so I can customize the workshop around specific people doing the job, not managers. So sure enough, she goes, not going to be a problem, not going to be a problem. Goes away and comes back. I got this email 3 days ago. Net 60 is a non-negotiable for us. And I said, okay, I'm not a fit. A Fortune 500 company, not a fit. I'm just on this. Like, that's not, it's non-desperation. Mm-hmm. And I learned this from my dad. When I was 12, I went with him to buy a car. He was looking at a BMW 7 Series. He took me with him, 12 years old. And I remember this like it was yesterday. They were negotiating over the price back and forth. And it was like contentious. And at one point, he gave him his number. I don't remember what it was. Let's say, 48 grand or whatever it was. And I go, best we could do is like 51. He goes, okay, I'll think about it. And he gets up, takes me by the hand, and walks out of the salesperson's office and gets in his car. And as he's pulling out a lot, the manager is running like to catch him and lowers the number, right? So he was kind of detached, back then, because he knows there's a ton of cars, just like there's a ton of people that want workshops, just like there's a ton of people you're cold calling. So if you run into someone that's angry or rude or says F you, I guess you could call them back if you want, but there's 17,000 other people that you could call that probably won't talk to you that way. So why don't you call one of them?
Yeah. Abundance. Yeah. Josh, you're awesome, man. I wish I could. Right. I want to talk to you more. Like, I love that. I mean, whilst the podcast is about selling, so we can't, but I've got super into the Stoicism stuff in the last few years, and it's really helped me. I've read a lot of Ryan Holiday's books, and I read The Obstacle is the Way after a very bad breakup a couple of years ago, and it literally, don't want to put too much gravity to it, but it really, really helped me. And then I'm kind of going through, he's done one for all the 6 virtues, and I'm kind of reading them one at a time at the moment. And they're awesome. So it's nice to hear this kind of ethos and this way of thinking, plugged into an industry that it's a different perspective for me. So I've really enjoyed this, and I'm sure all the listeners have as well. Where can people go if they want to find out more about you?
Wait, what have you noticed after reading some of this Stoicism stuff in terms of shifts that you've had, or maybe perspectives that have changed? Or
honestly, the biggest thing. So there's two. The first one is focus on what you can control. Like that's the biggest thing. And then I guess that's kind of twofold. Firstly, related to people, which is basically this entire discussion is I can't control what other people do and the way they behave and what they're going to do. All I can do is control the way I react to it. And then the other like part of that was it was a really tangible thing. I was sat waiting for a connecting flight in Lisbon. I was going to Brazil for a couple of months, and the flight was delayed by an hour or two. And I was like, I could be really angry about this right now if I want to be, or I can use this as like, actually, I've been sitting on a plane for ages. I'm going to sit on a plane for ages, and then I'm going to sit in a car for ages. I'm just going to walk and do laps of this airport and get my 10,000 steps in and read a bit more of my book. And then I'm going to get on the flight, and I'm going to be more tired and probably fall asleep there. And it was kind of like a real switch. It was that moment. And then suddenly I was like, right, I'm sat in traffic. I'm not going to be mad. I'm, whatever. They don't have the thing I want on the menu in a restaurant. I'm not going to be mad. So yeah, I would say those are the two real things that have objectively, changed the way I look at life.
It's interesting because in order to do that, you have to be self-aware, right? Like at some point you were thinking about your thinking.
Sure.
Right? You sort of caught yourself at that moment.
100%.
And you don't meditate. You're not doing any meditation at all.
A little bit, yeah. I kind of, did the sort of journaling and the meditation stuff for a bit, but not like actively sitting still and things. I mean, I like to think that me sitting on my surfboard every day in between waves is meditation, but in the conversations I've had here, I've realized that's actually not meditation. Meditation is upstream of that and allows you to actually sit in that stillness when I'm on the board because you need to do it. So I'm aware I probably should get into that practice a bit more, but I suppose a little bit. A little bit,
It's
yeah.
interesting. I had a similar, I was doing a marathon once, and it's pouring down rain. This guy comes next to me, and I go, dude, this fucking sucks. Freaking rain. And I'm like in a terrible mood. And he looks at me and goes, dude, this is awesome. It's like, what an adventure it is to be able
Yeah.
to run in Mexico in this beautiful rain. And it's the same thing happening. Like the rain is coming down. Like that's what, in Stoicism terms, that's what is. And then as people, our egos, we can have a 2-hour conversation on this because of how we were raised in situations that happen to us. We view it very differently. So it's not really the event that is causing the suffering. It's the interpretation of the event. It's like my wife and I went and saw the Barbie movie a while back, and I thought it was amazing, and she thought it sucked. It's the same movie. It's just her experiences thought it sucked, and mine, I like the dance numbers and whatever. Like, so that's an interesting thing to kind of look at, which is there's always sort of multiple ways to look at it. Where we get into trouble is when we're not aware of the thoughts, and they just make us so angry that the plane's delayed. And which I think is most people, because I've been at the airport. I've seen people yelling and screaming because airlines were delayed.
Yeah. And we get to like this whole idea as well of like suffering is going to happen whether we like it or not, but we get to choose what that suffering is. And I think, like you said at the very, very beginning, brings it back. Like you can sit and view you had a shitty quarter or even just a shitty one sales call, and you can be like, I'm going to suffer because of this. Or you can, view it through a different lens and take a learning experience from it, or perhaps literally just close the door behind it and go, right, a bad day is a bad day. Tomorrow will be different,
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten into no free will on this podcast. That's a whole other thing, but we'll do that next time.
We'll have to do round two. Josh.
All right.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, Josh, I've loved this. I really appreciate your time.
All right, Sandy.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks, Josh, again, and we will see you all for the next one.